Hey there, Pearlside small group leaders. Thank you for joining another Small Group Leaders podcast where we help you to prepare to lead your small group. Pastor Billy here, joined by Pastor Jennifer Matias.
Hello, everybody.
And we're excited to dive into this week's discussion. A little bit of a different discussion, not sermon-based, but related to what God has been teaching us throughout the year. And the main thought in Scripture is basically this, that, God is consistently trying to teach us lessons of faith. So that we grow to become more like Christ. However, we often fail to listen or reflect on these lessons, causing us to forget. And it's important that we do pause periodically and reflect on what God's trying to teach us to ensure that we truly assimilate these lessons into our lives. Because if we don't, we run the risk of having to repeat those lessons, or worse, we drift away from God and His purpose for our lives entirely. And, the picture that I always get in my mind, Pastor Coach used to always say this, God is always speaking. It's just we're not listening.
Right.
It's kind of like the radio waves are always in the air. If you remember those old school radios with the antenna and you got to tune in, right? It's like, and then you tune in and then you can hear, Michael Jackson or something, right? But if you don't tune in, it's not that the music's not playing. It's just you're not tuned in.
Right.
You're not tuned into what God is
Your
saying.
Antennas aren't up.
Yeah, your antennas aren't up. You got to put some tinfoil on that, and you got to tune that dial so that you can catch that signal. Some of the young people are like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
I know.
Spotify's always on. It's like Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is always there. You just got to connect.
Right.
There you go. Okay, that's a modern one. Rochelle likes that. And so God is always trying to speak to us. It's just we don't listen, and if we don't learn those lessons, we're going to have to go through them again. And that's actually what we see having happened to the people of Israel in the Old Testament after coming out of Egypt. They failed to learn lessons, so they had to go around that mountain again. Rather than a short few-week journey from Egypt into the Promised Land, it ended up taking them 40 years of going around the mountain, going around the desert one more time because they failed to listen. And we know the story that a whole generation of people never inherited the promise of God, never entered into the Promised Land because they didn't learn the lessons God was trying to teach them not after the first time, second, third time. And so they never made it. And that would be really sad for us. God has a plan and a purpose for all of our lives, but if we don't learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn, because we don't ever pause to reflect, we're busy, we've got stuff going on, we're busy watching YouTube or whatever, life is lifing, and so then we have to go through it again, and that's really sad. And so this week's discussion, we want to pause to really begin to reflect on what has God been trying to teach us so that we can learn those lessons and move on to the next lesson and the next challenge and the next victory, rather than having to keep on repeating those old lessons over and over again. And so this week's discussion questions, the first one is this: reflect on the first half of this year. What is one main lesson you feel like God has been trying to teach you? What did He do to teach you that lesson? And how has your faith grown through that? Right? So it's reflecting on what has God been trying to teach you. And you may have to pause a little bit longer and let people really think, because if they haven't reflected prior to coming to group, they're thinking about this cold. But yeah, what did God do to teach you that lesson? It's often through circumstances, trials, challenges, even victories and opportunities that God is speaking to us. And then how has your faith grown through that? Pastor Jen, you have a reflection, a lesson that God's been teaching you?
Well, first of all, I can't believe it's the first half of the year that's almost done.
Yeah.
I want to reflect on that. But second, I've been noticing myself after group that I get a little frustrated for the person sharing their story for the 10th week in a row. It's the same story that they're facing over and over again, or somebody who just hasn't really shown any progress, or maybe is just coming to group inconsistently, and I've been noticing I've been getting frustrated. And I think the lesson that God has been telling me is to stay in my lane. It's God's job to grow them. It's not my job. I get to provide, as a small group leader, opportunities for them to grow in their walk. They get to share their stories, and then we get to pray for them. That's my lane.
Yeah.
And I had a really kind of like in my face moment just last week, because I came to group and I granted, there's a few people in discipleship track. There was somebody who was having car trouble, but it ended up that nobody came for group. And so I had this moment before I came across this question on the discussion guide: God, what are you trying to teach me as a small group leader? And I realized, okay, stay in your lane. Like, if nobody shows up, that's okay, because they're still God's children, not mine. And it has no reflection of my leadership, how well I'm performing as a leader. it just was a circumstantial thing. And yes, I was able to recapture a few of them, but for that moment, I was sitting there kind of wondering who's going to show up, because there were some RSVPs, but the people who said they were going to come ended up not showing up. And then I had to debate, how long do I wait there until maybe somebody's going to show up? And sure enough, people started texting me, I'm not coming, I'm not coming, I'm not coming. And so, that's like the first time in a really long time where nobody showed up for a group. So I do think God was trying to teach me and help me remember, it's not my job to save them, not my job to bring them to heaven.
Yep.
It's my job to just be there.
It's good.
Be there, pray for them. And so I sat there, prayed, and then I went home.
Nice. As I always say, if you haven't been stood up for small group or one-to-one, you haven't lived.
Right.
So
right, yes.
you're in good company, Pastor
Yes,
Jen.
yes.
And that's a part of the journey. You know, as you were sharing that, I was reflecting even before that, I've been working with a lot of people going through a lot of stuff recently.
Yeah.
You know, people that I'm discipling. Naomi and I are working with a couple right now. I'm discipling another guy, and just a lot of really hard stuff. And just realizing, it's a reminder, not that I ever forgot this lesson, but people go through some really real hard things, and the power of being present and consistent in someone's life. And as I'm sitting there listening to some of them doing one-to-ones and different things, I'm remembering the people that were there for me when I was that person,
Right.
with a lot of hard stuff, sitting with me at Burger King and sitting with me when I was going through my parents' divorce and just all kinds of other things. And I was reminded of that. And, sometimes as we journey on as Christians, we can kind of forget where we came from. We're like, life is good now. I know Jesus. I have hope. I know I'm going to heaven and my marriage is doing well. You just can't take those things for granted. But as I'm sitting there listening to people reflecting on their journeys, I'm like, whoa, I remember being hopeless like you. I remember thinking, is there a light at the end of the tunnel for me, like this person is? That's been powerful to me, just to remind myself of that. I think it's been teaching me, to have empathy and compassion. Not that I lost it, but those moments really rekindle it, right? And again, it just reinvigorates. This is why we do what we do, as leaders. Not just as church leaders, but as Christians. Like Christians, we should be present for people that are going through stuff, right? That's what love is, And so that's been just, I feel like it's over the last 6 months. I'm like, wow, there's some really heavy things people are going through, and having to sit and listen and be present. And sometimes it's painful, to sit for an hour as someone's just unpacking, literally painful. Your butt starts getting sore, your back gets sore. Like, I don't want to move too much and fidget, but you're like, okay, but if someone was there for me, I need to be there for them. And it just reminds me that, man, the world is, people are hurt and broken, and they need someone to be that loving presence for them in that moment. And one praise report on that is seeing gradual victories. Like people they're starting to get through it. They're starting to see God at work in their struggle, in their situation. Naomi and I just had a meeting yesterday, and it's like, wow, there's some progress, And sometimes just like, man, I don't know if there's any hope for this situation, And then you see progress, and okay, God, like you said, you're in control. These are your people. So that's been a lesson I feel like God's been trying to just remind me of just in the last, several months.
Yeah. And I love those reminders, because a lot of times we think we're sitting across the table with somebody for them.
Yeah.
But so many times it's for us.
Yes.
Right? It's for us to reflect. It's for us to see how God is moving. And I've just learned over the years, not taking those moments for granted, but remembering, like, they're almost like monuments for us sometimes, because the person talking, across the table doesn't always know how it's affecting me. But I try to make sure I note it in my soul. Like, if it's affect me, I want to make sure I remember that, because that's really God moving in my life as well, too.
And that's what I love about ministry. We say it in the growth track, right? Like, we invite people to serve. It's for them. Like, yes, it helps the church. Yes, we need people to serve, but I just know for myself how many times, as I'm pouring out into someone else, God is pouring into me. And I don't know that there's any other way that I would have learned that lesson if it wasn't by pouring out into somebody else. Like I've said before in different sermons, that when you work, you earn a wage. You expect to get paid for what you do. When you serve, you don't get anything out of it. You're doing it completely, exclusively for the benefit of someone else, and hopefully worship unto the Lord. But I've found that in that place, when you're serving and emptying yourself, whether it's driving a shuttle, ushering, or discipling someone, it postures us in a place for God to speak. And I found, so many of those landmark moments in my life, those core memories of faith are in moments where I'm discipling someone or serving someone or serving, that the Lord speaks to me so powerfully. So I 100% agree. So leaders, thank you for what you do, because you're positioning yourself in that place every single week, doing the discipleship that you're doing, the outreach and leading your groups. And I pray that you have some significant lessons come out of that as well. So this first question really is about reflecting on what God's been teaching you. Like for me, like I said, I think he's been trying to deepen my empathy and just that reflection of where I came from. And but this next question is this: what is a lesson you feel like God is trying to teach you now in this season of your life, right? So it's not the past season. What's he trying to teach you now? Because sometimes we can get stuck in the lessons on the past and we miss the lessons in the present. So in what way is he stretching you to become more like Christ through this specific lesson in your life right now? Explain. Pastor Jen, any thoughts there?
So I think God's trying to remind me how big he is and how I can trust him. I can have my faith in him, that it's not about me, that even despite my mistakes or my failings, he's still God. And I love that. That's something probably I'm going to learn for my entire lifetime. It's not something I'm just learning in this season, but it's something that I'm going to be able to continue on and continue seeing him move. And I think even as I continue to walk with God, it's not that it gets smaller and smaller for me, but over the years, it's like God is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Like I see more of his power, more of his glory, more of his healing, more of his love. It's strange. It's like you think you've arrived, like you understand God more. And so God gets smaller. But actually the opposite is true. The more you learn about God, the bigger he actually becomes and more powerful and more loving that he actually becomes. And so I love that this being a leader, being in ministry helps me to actually discover who God is.
That's really good. And that's actually how it should be, right? And so, I mean, if God is getting smaller, because I do know some people who've, it's like God's getting smaller to them. I think it's like what we were talking about in the last question. You're not pouring out, right? You're that, it's like if you're that pond that is stagnant, there's no inflow, there's no outflow, then you just get stagnant, right?
Yep.
But when you're pouring out, God pours fresh water in, and it's like you get a new revelation, a fresh perspective of what he's doing on the earth. And so if God is getting smaller, your faith is not growing, it's probably because you're not pouring out. I mean, I haven't met a person who's living on mission yet that is bored in their faith, or is like, I'm just, you're growing because you have to be, because God is always doing something.
Right.
That's a really great point. For me, I was thinking about, so my son Mike is graduating next year. He's becoming a senior.
Exciting.
He's going to enter his senior year.
Yes.
And I realized in this season, I'm keenly aware to the fact that I'm running out of time. There's a sense of urgency, not just for me and pouring into his life. And parents, you all can relate to this. I don't know how those of you that have had adult kids now did it, but running out of time with him to pour into him while he's under my roof. But also, we've been reaching out to the sports community. I talk about it all the time, his sports community, his school community. Now for the last, 8, 9, 10 years, I think that we've been in this basketball road, 10 years. Wow. And running out of time because it's going to come to an end. It's going to be finite. He's going to play his last game at some point. It's going to be, January, February-ish. And so there's a clock. And I just, you don't think about that until you face that. But just the urgency that I feel to connect with all the people I need to connect with on his team, the parents, the coaches, do my best last few shots of the gospel presentations or whatever testimony sharing, relationship building, because it's going to come to an end, And I think that sense of urgency I feel in a lot of areas, just to not waste time, because this season will come to an end, and a new season will begin, and it'll be great, but this season's going to come to an end, and I don't know that I've ever thought that finitely with this realm of my life before. So that's something I feel like God's trying to teach me. Trying to be very purposeful and intentional. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, right? And it's a great gift to be a part of a community where you can, because you guys have been able to reach in that community, and then to know that there's another season coming. As it ends, there's going to be something else that God's going to really bring you guys to. But that athletic season of being a parent in that realm, you get a lot of great conversations, great opportunities to share with people.
Yeah, so like even on July 3rd this past week, we did a game night with a couple of the parents, a couple of families, and and part of that was because we're running out of time. I don't know how much more time we're going to have to do this with these families, so we got to make the most of it while we have it for the gospel. So yeah, so what are those lessons that you feel like you're learning in this season? What is God trying to teach you? So I would encourage you leaders, before you come to group, to reflect. What did you learn this first half of the year? What is God trying to teach you now, so that you come with something substantive to share, and you're not, deer in the headlights trying to figure it out in the spot, and it's shallow. So hopefully we're all internalizing these lessons. And then here's the last one. What is one area of your life that you need prayer for right now? And it will likely relate to these previous two questions. That's great. Share that, because the first prayer point is this: pray for one another in these areas where you need prayer. We said here to break into pairs so that there can be more substantive prayer, personalized, versus just kind of going around the circle of 5 or 6. It can be shallow and also daunting. So pair up and pray for one another, and let's really make this a meaningful moment that God will move, but also we'll learn the lessons God's trying to teach us. And then lastly, of course, who is that one person you're praying for in this season to come to Jesus as their Lord and Savior? Take turns praying for these people as well, because undoubtedly God is moving us towards lost people that he wants us to reach, and often we're not slowing down to pause and reflect on that. We just go about our lives. Great. So this is going to be a great group, guys. Looking forward to hearing about the testimonies that come out. But let's make it a great moment of pausing, reflecting, encouraging one another, and spurring one another on to continue growing towards Christ and his purpose for our lives, which always includes making disciples and lost people. So thank you for all that you do, leaders. You guys are the heroes of our church. We would not be who we are without you and all of your effort and sacrifice and being stood up at groups and one-to-ones. But that's all part of us being the hands and feet of Jesus, to love our neighbor as we love the Lord. So thank you so much. Have great groups this week, and let's continue growing towards Jesus. God bless you. Have a great one. Thank you.